freedom, passed from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this great land of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we face and that has impacted so many areas of our lives, from our relationships, our communities, our entire country. We'll be great again as a nation, as a country, when we are great again in character. When we're good, solid, decent people, honoring our best ideals, doing our best to make a positive contribution and to make it all work, then we're strong and we're prosperous. All good things follow. But that's not been the trend of the last several years. Hopefully the tide is turning, the pendulum is swinging back. At least that's part of what we do here, is try and swing that pendulum back, bring us to our senses. So if you want to join the conversation, I'm happy to have you do so. It's good to be back live tonight. I was away last week. One more time. It seems like I've been away a lot lately, but I'm here to stay for a while, for quite some time. And we are live, so I can take your calls at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'm happy to have you join the conversation. There's going to be a lot to talk about tonight. Been a lot in the news, from the scandals in the Soccer Federation to the former speaker, Dennis Hastert, and his problems, caught with his misdeeds now coming to light. Also the Duggar family and the issues there. All kinds of things in the news lately that we can talk about. Good examples of just exactly what I've been talking about week after week on this program. But also we can talk about some of the material that I've been posting online. As you listeners know, I am a regular blog contributor, a contributing author to several websites, including my own. You can visit my website at www.drgeorgesimon.com. That's DRGEORGESIMON.com. You can visit my blog at manipulative-people.com. That's www.manipulative-people.com. And also, I write for another blog at www.counseling with two L's, counselingresource.com. So you can find articles that I've written on all those sites. Um, and the last series of articles that I have been writing on the manipulative-people.com blog has been on the continuum of character disturbance. You know, I wrote my second book, Character Disturbance, The Phenomenon of Our Age, about 5 years ago now. And I wrote it because, well, two reasons. One, as I've said many times on this program before, and as many of you know, especially those of you who are listening who are in the mental health professions or the helping professions of any kind, I wrote it because mental health professionals these days are asked to do something they were never meant to do, and frankly, not until recently were they even trained, even remotely trained, to do what they are asked to do so frequently these days. Uh, Mental health professionals, by and large, were trained and schooled in the philosophy of what we call neurosis. And this is a phenomenon whereby people's insecurities and their inner fears and their impoverished self-image and their oppressive conscience get the best of them, and they are basically anxious, nervous wrecks suffering from bizarre symptoms of one type or another. That is basically the result of the stress that they have caused themselves because of their inner conflicts. This is what neurosis is all about. And mental health professionals were trained to deal with that. We were trained to deal with that person who drives themselves so hard to do such a perfect job at the office that they've literally given themselves an ulcer, or they've struggled with chronic headaches or other symptoms of stress because they've tried too hard, they've put too much on themselves, their conscience is too oppressive, they have a fear of failure, whatever the case may be. These kinds of things drive the neurotic person, and they become anxious and develop symptoms as a result. Well, mental health professionals were trained to deal with that. We were trained to recognize the kinds of ways people can bring stress upon themselves and ways that people can learn to alleviate that stress, mainly by working through their unconscious or repressed inner conflicts. And once they do that, they're free basically to be more themselves and to lead a less stress-filled life. That's what we are trained to do. Well, then comes the 21st century, and comes the age of entitlement, permissiveness, moral relativism, the me age, shall we say, and we have a whole different host of problems on our hands. Instead of people being riddled with fears and insecurities, instead of them being overly hung up, we have folks all too many times who aren't hung up enough about the kinds of things that they let themselves do. And as opposed to having so much conscience, so much of a repressive conscience that they literally drive themselves to be so perfect that they end up giving themselves an ulcer or otherwise making themselves sick. Instead of that, we have too many folks these days who don't have enough conscience, who don't get upset enough with themselves, who don't drive themselves nearly enough, who don't take their responsibilities seriously. So the problems that we have today, we still have neurotic individuals among us, but we have far more individuals whom I refer to as character impaired or character disturbed. And they exist along a spectrum. This is the thrust of the articles that I have written over the past couple of weeks. And a second installment of which is on the Manipulative-People blog right now. So, on the spectrum of character disturbance, we have individuals who are maybe a little bit neurotic. Maybe they've got some hang-ups, maybe some fears and insecurities, but they also have some real serious defects of character. And then at the extreme end of the neurosis versus character disturbance spectrum, we have those individuals who are not neurotic at all, who lack conscience, who don't get hung up at all when they let themselves do things that they shouldn't basically do. They don't care. The things they do are not motivated by unconscious inner conflicts. They know exactly what they're up to, and they're up to no good, shall we say. Those are the folks at the extreme end of the character disturbance spectrum. Fortunately, as I mentioned in the article from this past Friday, fortunately, most people are somewhere in the middle on this spectrum. Some lean more toward the character disturbed end, some people more toward the neurotic end. But there are very, very few folks at the extremes. There are very few folks who are completely conscience-less, who are without conscience, without empathy, without sufficient care and concern about their fellow human being, and who lie, cheat, and exploit at will, use and abuse others wantonly. There are very few folks, fortunately, at that end of the extreme. However, what we are seeing in our society, in our permissive entitlement culture, is we are seeing more individuals lie more on the character disturbed side of the spectrum. It's always a matter of degree, and that's what I've been writing about. I've been writing about the fact that you're likely to encounter someone who's character disturbed in your life, and you're likely to end up scratching your head, wondering, how do I tell? How do I tell how bad this is? What are the signs that let me know that this relationship is hopeless? What are the signs that let me know that I'm in for trouble if I hook up with this individual? How do I know that the person that I'm working with is the kind of person I need to be on my safeguards about? Is the kind of person I need to watch out for? Is the kind of person I need to protect myself against? How do I know these things? Well, that's not easy, but it's exactly why I wrote Character Disturbance. I wrote it because I wanted folks to get an idea of what the spectrum looks like. And I also illustrated what the opposite ends of the spectrum look like. I indicate in the book what a pretty neurotic individual looks like, and then I indicate what a more severely character impaired individual looks like. And I give plenty of vignettes that illustrate and give information about how to judge these folks. And once you're equipped with this kind of background, you are more likely to be more empowered in your relationships. So that's why I wrote Character Disturbance. I'm happy to say it's still a bestseller after 5 years. It is not yet quite the bestseller that In Sheep's Clothing is, but it's getting there. It took In Sheep's Clothing, which was another small press publication, it took In Sheep's Clothing about 8 years to develop the strength of bestseller status that it has enjoyed for the past almost 12 years. And in September of next year, in September of 2016, In Sheep's Clothing, the definitive work on manipulative people, this book will be out in print in some form, in some edition, 20 years come this next September 2016. That's unbelievable. And I am so edified. I am so edified. I would never have thought when I was working on this, it was truly a labor of love. It took me a long time. It was a lot of clinical research and a lot of hard labor to get that book done. But it finally came to print in 1996, and it'll be 20 years next year. Can't believe it. And still a bestseller. But what I was saying is it took 8 years for it to gain the real foothold that it did in the marketplace. And that looks like it's going to be about the same thing holding true for Character Disturbance. If you haven't read it yet, I urge you to. If you know somebody that needs it, I hope you'll recommend it. You can download it from Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com or iBooks. You can get it in your favorite bookstore. And I'm hoping soon that it, like In Sheep's Clothing, will also be published in several foreign languages. I just received the book covers. Well, actually, I received 3 sample books as well, and scanned the book covers, which I'll be putting up on the internet pretty soon, of the Polish edition of In Sheep's Clothing. So we now have the Polish edition, the Russian edition, the Hungarian edition, the Korean edition, the German edition. Let's see, I know I'm leaving one out. Oh, I know I am. Right off the top, I can't think of them all. But we also have the Czech edition. The Japanese edition. Excuse me, I forgot the Japanese edition. I'm forgetting others. Any rate, we are likely to see a similar thing happen with Character Disturbance, and I will be most edified if that happens. I really put a lot into the book. It was meant to be a follow-up book to In Sheep's Clothing. It was meant to be a more in-depth study of what I consider to be the phenomenon of our age. Character Disturbance, I wanted the average person to understand it. I wanted the average person to understand what's going on in our culture, why these things are happening, why our relationships these days seem to be characterized with so much heartache and trouble because of the character crisis that we face, and what we need to do to turn things around. So that's why I wrote Character Disturbance. I hope you'll get it. I hope you'll recommend it. I hope if you like it, you'll write a positive review on Amazon or any of the other online booksellers about it, because it's the word of mouth that has kept all my work highly visible and strong in the marketplace. So I really appreciate that more than I can say. Once again, it's an open line program tonight. There's no set topic. I do have a few things I want to talk about, which I'll be talking about in just a few minutes. But if you want to join the conversation, if you have anything you want to contribute at all, you want to ask a question, perhaps you have some questions about the articles that have been posted on the blog the last couple of weeks. Perhaps you are hoping that I'll talk about something that I haven't been talking about on the blog. And perhaps you want to join the conversation. Or perhaps you have a situation that you're facing that you want some help in understanding. Perhaps you're dealing with someone who has a character disturbance. Perhaps you're trying to figure out where they are on the spectrum. It looks like we have a caller here. I'm going to try and take this call. Hello and welcome to Character Matters.
Hello, Dr. Simon.
Hello.
I have been listening to you for a couple of weeks, several weeks on UCY. I wondered if you can scale up your description of a psychopath to a culture. Do you believe there are psychopathic cultures?
Do I believe there's a psychopathic culture? I do believe that cultural factors definitely influence the psychopathy.
Well, I mean, do you believe that cultures could be based on psychopathy and propagated for a long time on a particular psychopathy?
Well, say a little bit more about what you mean about that. It sounds like you've got an opinion about this. Share with me what you're thinking.
Well, most people would agree that the culture that would do human sacrifice, tear their hearts out, as the Mayans did, would be psychopathic, correct?
Well, that's a good question. It's a good question. We have always had certain characteristics and tendencies and traits among us as a species, and we have always had individuals who we would presently identify as psychopathic among us. And there was a time in our history, there was a time in our evolutionary history when these folks actually served a really adaptive purpose, shall we say. And for the benefit of folks out there who listening who might not be too sure what we're talking about, let's talk about what psychopathy is in its heart. And I'm gonna borrow from Robert Hare, who is the preeminent researcher in this area for the last 40 years. He's the one that brought back the term that Cleckley coined many years ago, and has done a lot to refine the definition. But essentially, what psychopathy is a lack of empathy so great, an incapacity for empathy so great, that the person can't form the kind of moral, social conscience that most of us form. They just don't have enough care about other human beings to be able to form such a conscience. And that's why Dr. Hare titled his first book on the topic, Without Conscience. So really, this empathy deficit is the key. And psychopaths come in two varieties: the folks who have no empathy to start with, and the folks who can experience empathy but also have the incredible capacity to wall it off mentally, or to what we call compartmentalize it, to turn it off basically like a light switch.
So you're talking about bankers and politicians, respectively.
Well, certainly not all. You know, we,
Well, pretty close, right?
well, we do see these kinds of things, and then we say, we tend to generalize. We paint sometimes with big brushes. Not everybody in these fields is that way. And as I point out in my book, Character Disturbance, it's a continuum. The aggressive personalities are prone to go into these kinds of pursuits, and some of them are indeed are psychopaths or sociopaths. And
So
there are things in our culture that do foster this kind of personality development.
that is my question, Dr. Simon.
Yeah,
Are
and
there not social structures that are built upon psychopathic principles, and the people that populate those particular political structures or social structures,
yeah.
they rise to their psychopathic heights,
Yeah.
I would say.
Well, let me pose this to you. I propose that it's not just that culture shapes individuals who turn out to be psychopaths, because there is a constitutional variable here. We know that there are some people who are wired a bit differently and lack the capacity to develop empathy. So that's strictly.
Would that be genetic
Yeah.
wiring, or
Yeah.
would this be social wiring?
Well,
You believe that psychopathy
it's
is genetic?
yeah, it's not an either or thing. And as a matter of fact, I have 3 articles on the internet about that. It's not that simple. And it's not an either or thing. There are individuals who are genetically predisposed because of their impaired capacity to develop empathy. But that doesn't mean that it's strictly genetic. There are plenty of things in the culture that can foster a lack of empathy development. So it's not as black and white, and it's not an either or thing. But to get back to what you were saying here, one point I'd like to make is it's not just that culture shapes, but because we have so many more impaired characters out there, because we are in the midst of this character crisis, the individuals among us create the culture. And the kind of culture we're building, unfortunately, is the kind of culture that basically promotes and even rewards this sociopathy. So it's a dynamic kind of interaction. It's a slippery slope on both ends.
So what you're saying is we don't know the cart before the horse or the chicken or the egg. Does the psychopathy create the society we're living in, or does the society create this psychopathy?
I'm saying that because we have so much character disturbance, we are fashioning for ourselves increasingly a heartless, entitled society that in turn promotes more character disturbance. That's what I'm saying. It's a vicious circle.
The societal characteristics that are built around our present civilization create character disturbances.
That's correct. But once character
So
disturbance,
would you say that would be because of the love of money, or would it be because of fear of whatever? What creates this character disturbance?
well, like I said, it's a vicious circle. The cultural milieu has a lot to do with shaping that. And then when the cultural milieu shapes that, and there are more individuals in the culture with character disturbance, they in turn continue to erode those institutions that once shaped decent character in human beings, and they continue to promote those institutions that create bad character in human beings. It's a vicious circle. One feeds
You're right.
the other.
Yeah, absolutely. You are again talking about bankers and politicians.
Well, certainly not all of them. So I have some friends who are.
I'm just saying, you could write that description right there, and it would be true, my friend.
Uh, did you have another comment you wanted to make or a question you wanted to ask?
No, no. I just wanted to make sure that you understood that character disturbance does definitely translate to cultural disturbance. You know, you can look at Mao and you can look at Pol Pot and any of these great cults of character can create a civilization that is completely dysfunctional.
Yeah,
And I believe that is what we are doing now here.
yeah,
So that's what was my point was.
yeah. I don't think you
Thank you
could.
very much.
Yes, thank you so much for calling in. I don't think you can ignore evolutionary history, however. And
I pre-
there was a time in our evolutionary history where the heartless warriors among us were part of the reason that we survived as a species. These folks who had ice water in their veins and who were feared by all, but who were fearless themselves, um, actually had a place in in our evolutionary history. And so there
you
is.
are Dr. Simon, I'm going to tell you, you are a good soul because you believe these people will eventually join us in our evolutionary history. However, they plan to control it
Oh, no,
and
no, 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 no,
manipulate
no,
it.
no, you misunderstand what I'm saying there. No, I'm not giving them any credit where credit is not due. What I'm saying is that those fearless warriors among us were part of the reason that tribes survived. They had an adaptive function back in the time when basically we were not civilized. In a civilized world, however, these folks don't have a place anymore. And they are basically the end of civilization. They are the folks who right now in various parts of the world would like to bring down what's left of civilization and impose basically their totalitarian, authoritarian view of the world, where basically everybody bows at their feet and they are gods unto themselves. This is
Thank you.
happening right now.
Thank you. Because the people who determine what civilization is, what gives them the right.
Well, I thank you for your call, and I hope you keep listening, and I hope you keep enjoying the program.
I've listened to you. Thank you, sir.
Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And if you'd like to join the conversation, please give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. If you have a story to share, if you have a question to ask, that was a very interesting discussion on the topic of psychopathy. You know, we're very lucky. Martha Stout wrote a book uh, called The Sociopath Next Door. And it's a pretty good book. One of the points she was trying to make in this book is that not all psychopaths are serial killers, and they're not all in prison. Uh, there are snakes in suits, and this is what the caller was alluding to. And there are people who you could literally label, as she titled her book, the sociopath next door, the person who looks like they're conforming and who looks good on the outside, but who has a heart of ice on the inside, is in it for just themselves, has no heart for other people, and is consumed by their own personal greed and would do you in a minute. You know, these are the Bernie Madoffs of the world who when caught, after they have bilked even seniors out of their life fortune, will blame the victim for their greed, for wanting to make too great a return on their money. You know, some retiree who had a little nest egg, but maybe it wasn't quite enough. And then this opportunity came along that they thought they could actually make really good returns for a while, and therefore maybe actually really retire. And then they trusted this person with those life savings, only to be cleaned out. And then to have this heartless soul say, well, they kind of deserved what they got, because after all, they were greedy for wanting to make that kind of return on their money anyway. This is the kind of thing that we're talking about. Some folks call these folks the sociopath next door. Some people call them snakes in suits. You know, they're your bankers, your lawyers, your business persons who don't really have the sense of social conscientiousness that can make it all work. You know, this free enterprise system that we have presents wonderful opportunities. And this freedom that we enjoy, I've said this many times, it presents boundless opportunities too. We have opportunities because we have freedom. But here's the deal. None of it can work without character. None of it. It can't work. You give people of decent character, people who care, people who have a heart, people who want to make a meaningful contribution, people who want to do their fair share, people who want to advance themselves but not at the expense of anyone else, and people who want to share in prosperity. You give those kinds of people freedom, the maximum amount of freedom. You leave them alone, you let them enterprise, and they build great societies. But when you afford that same amount of freedom to people without a heart, to people who are greedy, to people who have no social awareness, who rape, pillage, and plunder the planet and their fellow man with no remorse, no regret, no looking back. You give freedom to those kinds of folks. You create a culture of permissiveness and entitledness for those kinds of folks, and you've got trouble, big trouble. And we have more and more and more of those folks in our midst these days. That's the problem. We have now some almost 20 people who say they want to be president of the United States. We've never been more divided. We can't trust our leaders. We can't trust our teachers. We can't trust our judges. Sometimes we can't trust our law enforcement officials. And until we can, once again, I know that's a broad brush. I'm certainly not saying that it's a lost cause or that we're all bad. That's not the case. But what I am saying is that among our ranks right now is more character disturbance than we've ever had in our culture before. Everybody is somewhere along the spectrum. The extreme cases are still relatively rare. But there are far too many folks who are someplace along the character disturbance spectrum. And it's causing us problems, huge problems. It's eroding our culture. It's why our streets aren't safe. I grew up in a big industrial city where I could walk for 8 18 blocks from my house to a relative's house and not have to worry about my safety as a young child. And where my parents wouldn't have to face scrutiny as being negligent parents for letting me do it. Because there was such a thing as responsibility. You could trust your elders, any elder. You could trust that you weren't going to get mugged, let alone abducted or worse. As an adult, I wouldn't go walking 2 blocks in the same city that I grew up. And now, if that doesn't break your heart, nothing will. Something's happened to us, and we all know it. We all know it. And those responsible folks among us, we are so busy, we are so consumed trying to feed our lifestyle that we have no energy left over to do much about it. And we also have gotten to feel resigned, like there's nothing we can do about it. Well, there is something we can do about it. I write in Character Disturbance this mega trend that we have seen for the last 5 decades. The mega trend being this, that the burdens on responsible people grow exponentially each and every day. We constantly burden the already responsible. New laws, new regulations, new taxes, higher costs, increased responsibilities. We lay that all on the shoulders of those willing to take on the burden and make an honest contribution. And on the folks who shirk those responsibilities, the burden is shrinking every day and exponentially. Those willing to carry the burden get burdened even more. Those unwilling to shoulder any burdens at all and who are not willing to take any responsibility have less and less and less responsibility thrust upon them. We are a country that warehouses in jails and prisons a higher percentage of our population than any other country on the planet. It's a disgrace. It's not just a disgrace that we do it. I know there are some people who say, it's just the fact that we're misguided and we have too many people in prison who don't belong in prison. The real disgrace is that we have so many people who earned the right to get there. That's the real disgrace. It is an absolute disgrace. And it's one that will only be reversed. This megatrend will only be reversed when we start holding each other accountable once again. Really accountable. Now, this past week, the news hit about Dennis Hastert. This is a very interesting case. I suspect that we haven't heard the last of the possible victims of his wrongdoing. I think now we know about 4 accusers. We only learned of this mess because he was trying to keep one person silent. He was trying to keep one person silent, paying hush money, a lot of hush money, to keep one person from blowing the whistle. And as I got to reflecting on his case, and this is what I wanted to talk about tonight, and I'm going to do a little shameless self-promotion here, because I wrote this book, The Judas Syndrome, for people of the Christian faith community. I wrote this book 4 years ago, and it's probably the most meaningful book I've ever written. At least that's the way I feel about it. Now, stay with me here, because I'm getting where I need to go with this. How does this relate to Hastert and all this other stuff that we've been talking about? I really believe in the philosophy that this remarkable person who walked our earth over 2,000 years ago, almost 2,000 years ago, gave us, telling us how to live our lives, telling us what real life is all about. And telling us the way to get where we want to go. Defining for us the ultimate truths in life. And making some pretty fantastic claims about himself. And then I hear these people, these sanctimonious so-and-sos, who want to stand up and with their lips preach to everyone else and to protest their faith, to proclaim it from the rooftops. They believe in this. They especially want to claim that they believe in this person that came to show us how. And then they live their lives in complete hypocrisy. And it's not that they're just sinners like we all are. That's not it. We're all sinners. We all fail. We all renege on our best promises, and we all fail to measure up to our own best ideals. We all transgress. But there are these sanctimonious so-and-sos who want to hold themselves above us all. And they proclaim this faith from the rooftops. But they don't live it. And therefore, they really don't have it. Talk, as they say, as the adage goes, is remarkably cheap. Anybody can open their mouth and proclaim something. Anybody can claim verbally faith. It's one thing to say you have it. It's another thing to really have it and then to live it. You know, when I was writing the Judas Syndrome, I was trying to reconcile what in my own mind and trying to reconcile for the reader in terms that the reader could understand what James and Paul were trying to reconcile all these thousands of years ago. Faith has the power to save and transform. That and that alone can do it for us. Coming to believe in something, someone, other than the Lord of this world, in all of its phony promises and all of its false gods, as it were, all these things that we really worship. What do we really worship? Physical youth, beauty, money, power. These are the things we worship. Pleasure. Oh my gosh, what hedonists we've become. These are the things that we worship. We may say we go into our churches and our other temples on weekends and say we worship other things, but this is what we worship on a daily basis. These are the things we worship. But genuine faith does have the power to save and transform. It really does. Once you come to believe that there is another way, another truth, a higher truth, a different life, once you really come to believe that, you start living it. You part company with the things that you used to believe in because you've got something better to believe in. I give the example of the financial advisor who has the surefire scheme for you to realize a 50% profit on your investment and shows you proof after proof after proof of this success and neighbor after neighbor of yours who has taken that same advice and done exactly that same thing. And if you're going to place your trust, if you're going to say that you really believe and trust this advisor, they've got the ticket, they've got the way, then you're going to act commensurately. You're going to fork over some bucks and trust that what has happened to all those others that you witnessed will happen to you. You cannot say you believe and then not take commensurate action. So this is the problem I have with a guy like Hastert. or even the Duggars, or any of these other sanctimonious so-and-sos. Who want to preach with their lips about what it is they say they believe, and they want everybody else to be in their amen corner. If you look at this country in the current state of its culture, in all the marriages that have fallen apart, in all of the families that have become broken, in all of the businesses that have become self-serving, in all of the enterprises that have become nothing more than greed and power machines, from our political institutions to our bigger businesses. If you look at just the rampant irresponsibility and what we've allowed to happen, if you look at that, you will see that we are not a nation of faith. The gods we worship are not the God we proclaim. That's why I wrote The Judas Syndrome. It was my herald call. It was my call to faith. My personal testimony. My personal invitation to those looking for something, finding themselves lost in this sea of character disturbance, and hoping that they might be inspired by what I wanted to share. And that in that inspiration, they might also find their faith. Because I truly believe this. I truly do believe that faith can save. It has the power to transform. And I know you've heard many times from some folks, some bigoted folks, who will claim that this is, and always has been, but is being ruined now, this always has been, they'll claim, a Christian country. Well, we will be one when we act like one. When we act like one with each other, in all our relationships and our dealings with one another, in our marriages, in our families, in our businesses, in our schools. With other nations. That's when we would be such a country. You could have all the debate you want about whether or not that's a good thing. But that's really the challenge. I'll see you again next week. Thanks for listening. I'm Dr. George Simon. Character does matter.